Good morning, friends. Welcome to the Here's What We Know live stream. And I've invited one of the most fascinating guys I know. His name is Sam LaCrosse. He wrote Value Economics 1 and 2. But the first book, it was listed as Forbes magazine, one of the 8 books that will change your life. I've never had a chance to ask you about that. What did that feel like when you saw that? And good morning, by the way.
Well, good morning to you, sir. And thank you, Gary, that you always find a way to make me feel good in different ways, which is awesome. So I appreciate that, man. The Forbes thing was interesting because I found about it through a LinkedIn post that I believe one of the other authors that was tagged in the same article that I was had basically said, "Hey, I was tagged in this Forbes article, and I'm so humbled to be among these other great authors." And I was like, "Well, why is this in my notification box?" Then I look at the Forbes thing, and then I'm one of the people inside of the Forbes article, and I really couldn't believe it, to be honest with you. And I texted my parents it immediately, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, you're in Forbes magazine." And I remember my old boss, Chris Gandolfo at my old job, I remember he personally reached out to me and he said, like, this guy, like, basically is too removed from the CEO. He said, "That's amazing." And then I kind of got down a little bit because I realized that Forbes is basically, they just take money from a lot of publishers who can pay them a lot to promote their authors. I paid for a marketing package with Scribe, and they said, "Hey, why don't you talk about Sam's book inside of Scribe and in one of your articles?" And they said, "Okay." And so it was kind of like a pay for play sort of thing in one way. But I mean, being at Forbes at 24 years old at the time when I wrote the book was not what I expected whatsoever. And it was really humbling, to say the minimum of it, for sure.
I remember getting the book, because your publishers and stuff, they sent me the book and they said, "Hey, this guy, read it." And I read everything that I'm sent, right? I
Yep.
read everything if somebody's, if I'm going to take the time to, and I remember reading your book, and I kept going at the time. How old were you when you read this? When you wrote it, how old was that again?
So when I published it, I was 24, and I remember I wrote what ended up being chapter 4 of the book when I was 22. I was still in college when I wrote it. So basically it was I started writing on the internet in November of 2019. And that was my first post or ended up turning into chapter 4 of the book. And that was my "Hi, I have a blog" post. Other than that entry, that was going to be the 4th chapter of Value Economics. So I wrote that in January or December of 2019. So I was 22 when I wrote basically the whole spate of Value Economics, and then I published it at 24 after refining it.
And the reason I bring that because I kept going, there's no way, there is no way this guy has written this book. That somebody that age has written a book this wise, right? Because in my opinion, wisdom is knowledge plus experience. One
Yes.
without the other is kind of worthless.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're going, how did he get all of that? And it's really because what you did is you drew upon the knowledge of your father, of your family, of your grandparents, which is truly knowledgeable. And I hardly recommend you guys read that book. I don't care how old you are. You will find something in that book to go, yeah, yeah, I believe that because it's what it boils down to. What you value is what you will prioritize.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that you hit on probably the most important point, is that I stand on the shoulders of giants in all of my writing, whether it's my parents, who I look up to tremendously, my brother and sister who have their own difficulties and their own triumphs, my grandparents who I looked up to very, very highly, and as well as people in the culture that I look up to a lot. Like, I mean, the one I think constant either complaint or elevation I get from a lot of people is they others understand all of my cultural references or none of my cultural references. They're either like really, really engaged with those and not engaged with all those. So like, they might not know who Jordan Peterson is, the Flatbush Zombies are, or somebody else is like that. And so it's more of like, one, I do think that, and now especially in the last couple of months, I think I've really kind of taken this on myself. I have tried a lot of things, and I have put myself out there in situations where a lot of people, particularly of my age, have not. And so I will give myself credit there. But I also got really lucky in terms of what I've been exposed to, particularly in the close term around me as I've aged and as I got to the point where I felt confident enough to step out with asserting my ideas in that fashion.
Dude, because I nothing like a guy my age calling a guy your age, dude. But I still do it to my kids, and they're 14 and 12.
Yeah.
Your journey that you have overtaken in the last couple of months, because I follow you. I follow you on the social medias.
Yeah.
I text you. I listen to your podcast.
Mhm.
And as I was telling you before when we went on the air, and I've said this to him before. uh, Every time I listen to one of your podcasts where it's one of your rants, and those are the best, by the way. I
Yeah.
love you.
That's, thank you.
Is even when I don't fully agree with you, even when I sit back and go, yeah, I don't know about that. The thing I can always tell you is what I like is you will always make me examine my own thought process and why I believe the way I do, which I think is the highest compliment anybody can give someone doing what you do in that arena.
Yeah, I think so too. And I really appreciated that compliment coming from you because you talk to a lot of people, a lot of very influential people. You've met a lot of very famous people. And so you're talking to people all the time. That's essentially what your job in a lot of ways boils down to, which I think my job boils down to as well, is just communicating with other people and spreading ideas and getting ideas out there and contesting with ideas in the public sphere. And I think that whether it's like I have my idea, and a lot of my ideas have changed in very, very recent times because of a lot of things. And I think you mentioned the Scribe Media article that I put out last week. That changed because of a conversation I had with Eric Jorgensen. Like I talked to the CEO of the company and I said, okay, my opinion was wrong and I need to go back and revisit this. And I did, and I've gotten either elevation or pushback from that. But yeah, I think that I told you before we hopped on, I always like to stand on the truth wherever I'm coming from from certain types of ideas. So I like to get the facts right first and then build my opinions based off of those facts. And I like to convey my ideas in a certain way. And it's not everyone's cup of tea, as you can probably tell, and a lot of people can probably tell. I convey my ideas with conviction. I convey my ideas I don't even know if forcefully is the right word. I think it's kind of more like authoritatively, like I believe in what I'm saying. Like I don't put fluff out there. And I do that in order to just provoke people to think. And I think the ability to get someone to think about something, to analyze something is very, very important. And whether it's an opinion that I have about Gaza or capitalism or self-development or, one of the things like young people today or something, or masculinity or whatever, like I have a core principle and a core system that I've developed. And I think value economics has been my guiding star in a lot of ways. I've gone back to my own book several times in a lot of ways to help make sure I'm on the right track. And so I follow where my values tell me and I put it out into the world and I basically see what the world thinks of it. And so am I going to change my opinions necessarily because people are saying that they don't agree with me? I don't think so. I don't think I'll ever do that. But will I change my opinions based on facts and other elements of life that come into play? I absolutely will. In fact, I have a business agreement that I'll tell you about offline, Gary. I'm not really ready to announce it yet, but I'm involved with an organization now that I have been heavily critical of in the last couple of years and months, especially. But now I literally have paperwork in their email inbox right now to do business with them. And that is because they have changed my mind about something and they've given me an opportunity to say what I want to say and have a, good amount of influence in what I want to do and help someone that I really enjoy helping. And so I'm never closed off to anything, but I will never not voice what I'm truly thinking about something either, because if I've learned one thing from Jordan Peterson, and this is something he's told my friend Afis Bayoku on his old podcast, The Roommates, is that if he had one rule out of his 24 that he's posted publicly and a lot of other he's posting Quora and stuff like that, is that you should never lie. And I don't believe in lying. And I believe in saying the truth, no matter how harmful or harsh that might be, including to myself and most especially to myself. I'm viciously critical of myself. I'm going to say the truth no matter what. And I'll never stop doing that, I don't think.
Well, it's refreshing, and that's what I enjoy the most, is that you don't lie to yourself, and you do question, even if you think, sometimes I think I know which way politically you might lean, but what I appreciate is how you're willing to criticize that thought, that side, and that belief. And that's what I have no interest in ideologues, none whatsoever.
Yeah.
And if you're just I am Republican all the way, I am Democrat all the way.
Yep.
You've lost me.
Yeah.
I'm done with you. I don't. Yeah. Whatever.
You lose curiosity at that point, which is like, what's the point of even talking to the person at that point? You already know what they're going to say.
Well, and that's where society ruins itself.
Yes.
I mean, when you're willing to go along with your party, no matter what. Ooh, take a look over the last 10,000 years, if you will. It never goes well.
Yeah.
it just doesn't go well.
Yeah.
And so I find it fascinating. And I do want to, because I always do this for 10 minutes, but I do want to put it that this one little, as we go a little over,
Fine.
but you were in the corporate world. And you left a staggeringly high paying job. I don't know if you realize how staggeringly high paying job you were.
Yes.
Now, you earned every penny, but you left that. How and why?
Okay, so I left it. Well, so thank you. And so I left my job. Basically, how I left was very simple. I made the decision, honestly. So I left at the end of July, but I made up my mind in my head. And I said this in my article and in my podcast, and I can send that out to anyone who is interested. And it's all on my Substack and my podcast and everything else. I made my decision last March, like 2 Marches ago. So basically, it's been in the tank for about a year and a half. So I've been prepping this move for basically a year and a half, because for a couple of reasons, but primarily, as I stated in the article, and we can get into the other reasons maybe another time or later on if you have the time to do so. But I think the reason why I left is because I knew that in order to do what I wanted to do and be the fully actualized version of myself and push myself to the heights that I knew that I couldn't stay there. And that's partly on me. It's partly on the company that I was once employed by. But I left because I felt like I was leaving a lot on the table, more on the table by staying than I was by leaving. And when people have asked me about why that I've left, a lot of people, I basically tell them the same answer. I just say that it was time. And there's a lot of issues that led it to be time to leave. And those include my some levels of my upper management, telling me specifically that they would not promote me, that they would never, even though I was a top performing employee in the company, they would not promote me. They would not help me. I avidly disliked everything that I said outside of a work context. I got dragged into HR several times and got called every name under the sun when I did nothing to deserve those name callings under the sun. Yeah. And so it's like, it's all on my record. And the one thing, going back to my family, that I will never tolerate is my name being slandered, my last name being slandered. I don't care about Sam LaCrosse being slandered. I cared about the LaCrosses being slandered. And when you take my name and you say all of those isms that were not true onto it, that offends me, not because I get offended, but because my family and my name of my family means a lot to me, and you do not get to tarnish that. But unfortunately, when you do that inside of a company and you need to report those things, that is your brand inside of the company. It is filed away. And whenever someone looks up Sam LaCrosse in the company database, my company made the original database, the OG database, they have it somewhere. So they will pull that out and they will see all those things. They will not see all of the wonderful things that you've been kind enough to say about me, or the people whose lives I've changed inside of my business. They will see Sam LaCrosse was this, that, and the other. And I said, I'm going back to the truth. I have nothing to apologize for. I will not be called those things. I will not be denied my potential. I will not. And I will go after what I want to go after, because I have my own life to live and my own ambitions that I want to chase after. So that's a little bit of, and I basically crystallized that, and I made a plan, and I built 2 businesses, and I had a lot of things that I did in the past year that were really, really hard, but were really, really worth it. And so I felt that it was time for me to cash out, and I did so. And I left as respectfully as I could. And I think I left a really great brand for myself. To your point, it wasn't just the salary and the compensation package that was really high. Like, I had a lot of really, really awesome coworkers. Most of my coworkers were wonderful people. My teammates were wonderful people. I really enjoy, I still text them quite a bit. And I left all of that because I felt like I was called to something else. And I've been getting more and more, as you know, I mean, we're both men of faith, and I've been getting deeper and deeper into my faith recently. And I think, the point, I think an idea that I've been really wrestling with recently is that what's really the point of having faith if you don't use it and try something to step out in faith for? And I believe that essentially what I'm embarking on now is something worth stepping out in faith for. And that's ultimately what convicted me to take that step.
Wow. You need to write that column. What's the point of having faith if you don't use it?
Yeah.
Write that down.
I'll shout out my pastor, Ryan Weckerman. Ryan Weckerman, one of my pastors down here, he was on my podcast a while back. He wrote a great book called Single Today. He's been on Tim Ross's show. He's been on a lot of different other podcasts. He was on my show. And, Ryan, basically, I think he might have convinced me to write a book about religion and about Christianity. And I've really actually been chewing on that idea recently. So I might write that one. So I'll incorporate that one behind the other idea for sure. That's awesome.
Yeah, you can use today on my podcast. Ganesh Venkataramanan joins me, and he was an engineer. He's an engineer, scientist, and he decided he was going to go on a journey to figure out which faith works, right?
Yeah.
Just from a scientific standpoint.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing.
Fascinating,
That's amazing.
fascinating, and he did end up Christianity, and we talk about how he got there, and he goes because the math works. And
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
So
So
cool.
you can find that on my podcast. I strongly encourage you to check out Sam's podcast. Get the book Value Economics. He's got a program now that's helping. Again, we'll get all into that, but just go look him up online. And you're offering this thing, as you said. What is it? You're changing the top 1% of earners into what's the tagline? How do you say it?
Purpose-filled, value-driven entrepreneurs.
That guy. I am so excited to be a part of your journey and watching where you go with this. Sam, thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Gary. I appreciate it, man. This is always fun.